Hi, and welcome to Talking Wildfire. Today I'm here with someone special who's a former smoke jumper, and this is Rod Dow. And Rod Dow, he is an expert in camaraderie. And today we're going to talk a little bit about his career and also the idea of camaraderie. And it's a fascinating subject, and it's really important to all of us running small teams. And so this is Rod Dow. And Rod, would you share with us a little bit about your career first?
Yeah. First, I'm not sure I've ever heard myself described as an expert at camaraderie, but I do think
You
it's
are.
really important. So, so that's fine. Um, I started in fire following a high school buddy who wanted to jump because his brother jumped, and I started that as summer of '66. Was just on a timber crew, and the next year on a hotshot crew in McCall. Payette hotshots don't exist anymore. And the very next year, back then, you didn't need quite as much experience. And the very next year, I started jumping there in McCall. That was '68, and I jumped there for 7 years. During that time, I went up to Alaska three times, twice in '72 and once in '73, and I liked it up there. And so I transferred up in '75. We were jumping out of a place they call the T hangar. I just wrote a little history of the T hangar for the NH, well, for jumpers generally, and mostly the AK guys. Nothing comprehensive, but anyway, I jumped there for 25 years. Loved it in Alaska. All the distance and the animal life and incredible scenery. And then retired in '99 and actually worked for a little helitack crew here in Ellensburg. I'm in Yakima, Washington right now. And 30 miles up the road, they had a helitack crew, and I just drove their support truck for 3 summers. And the second half of that third summer, I started doing what people know as AD work, uh, administratively determined or some silly thing like that, whatever the AD is. And you just keep your quals up, your red card qualifications, and they call you at home. And most of that was uh, division, going out as a division soup. But as far as the camaraderie goes, I think it was part of how I went about the division supervisor stuff too. Um, I found out over the years that people would almost rather feel good about themselves than eat, or they talk about food and shelter and the critical things that people need. Um, your self worth is just about as important as food and water. Um, you can obviously last a little longer without it than water, but it's extremely important to people. A kind of an odd thing happened in '88. John Dubay and I were in charge of a huge fire. We didn't get there until it was 160,000 acres, and the Yukon zone had a whole bunch of big fires. So they asked us to keep it as a Type 3 operation. It ended up being 860,000 acres, over 100 miles of handwork line, over 100 helispots. It was amazing. It burned over 60,000 acres 3 different days, 85,000 acres in one day. And of course, that's all black spruce in AK. But anyway, the thing that reminded me about self worth, just to be efficient, we had John and me and the helicopter operation and 10 crews, and that was it. Well, 8 crews and 16 jumpers. but they were out as a crew. And just in order to make things efficient, because we were so spare, John and I made a rule that when a crew got off the helicopter for the evening, all they want to do was eat dinner. They don't want to mess around, and they don't like doing AARs and this kind of stuff. But we had to have information because we would fly out and check with these guys 6 flights a day. But the last 2 hours, we didn't know what happened. So the crew boss would come by, and he was instructed to send his crew to camp, come straight to our fire for 5 minutes. And everybody else, the helicopter people and supply people, whoever, no matter how important you thought your business was, if you came to the fire and one of those crew bosses was there, these are village crews, Indian crews, mostly Athabascan. We had a few Inuit crews, Eskimo crews. Whatever your business was, that can wait. If you see us talking to a crew boss, and one day I noticed that our helicopter foreman came striding up. He's got radios on, he's got Forest Service patches on him, and he looks kind of official. He comes striding up, he's got something he needs to say. He got there and he looked and he saw we were talking to one of the crew bosses. And he stood there, didn't say anything. He had clearly strode up there with an intent, and then he stopped and didn't do anything. And the crew boss, in the middle of talking to us, he noticed that. And I never forgot that. He was the most important person on that fire at that moment, including us. He was more important than we were for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever. It didn't take long. He just reported what he had. And that had a big impact on me for the rest of my career from 88 on. I thought of all leadership surrounding that point. If you show them, you can't fake it. You can't make it up, like you're important and safe, smooth things in the morning briefing and, that kind of stuff. That's not going to work. It has to be real. But if you let them know that they're part of the deal, that without them, the fire effort is not working, it has a huge impact on them. It doesn't matter if they're hotshots, jumpers, native crews, whatever, but the native crews were not accustomed to seeing that. They get a big variety of people that look down on them or talk down to them, and then others who don't. And man, they could see through it so fast. And so that had a big impact on me. As far as camaraderie in general, it is a huge part of firefighting in general and the jumper community in particular. I think it's pretty strong on real good hotshot crews too. But with the jumpers, you have a couple of things going on. The danger, of course, has something to do with it. You're with 70 other guys. I used to accuse the guys of they found the only 70 guys who like them, and so they keep coming back each year. They don't have a choice anymore. Now they have to come back because they found the only people who like them. But the danger is definitely part of that camaraderie. You get accustomed to it. You talk about it in a matter-of-fact way, and you count on other people looking at the danger the same way you do. There's a a thing that jumpers do. Of course, any jumper would recognize this immediately. You do a buddy check. With the ram airs, when the ram airs came on, the buddy check became way more important. But it was always a big part of jumping. You check your jump partner for to make sure his gear is good. With the ram airs, it's there's a lot more checking to do. Okay, let's say you found out that one of the jumpers was trying to backdoor your girlfriend. I mean, it doesn't happen much at the jump base, but I'm not saying it never does. Um, okay, you're mad about this, but he turns out to be your jump partner for that day or that week or whatever. When you check his equipment, you have to set that aside. You can't do it in any other way except the right way. And that always seemed like an important part of the attitude about danger to me. One other thing, I was sitting out, we had a pilot, Bill, oh man, I'll think of his name. He was the 1963 Bill Cornell. He was the 1963 bull riding champion of the world. He had the buckle. I got it at Madison Square Garden, and I was sitting out in the back ramp. If you're on standby, during regular 8 hours, everybody's got work to do. And sometimes, if it's busy, then you're working right through standby hours. But sometimes it's slack and not that much going on. And I was sitting out in the back, just me and Bill. And I said, Bill, what's the deal with these turbine engines? There's supposedly 15% of power at the far end that you're not supposed to use. He said, oh, you can use it, but if you leave it firewalled, you're going to fry the engine. I said, okay, Bill, so you got a full load. You come out of a fog bank, and unbeknownst to you, you're in a box canyon, and you have to firewall it. How long is the engine going to last? He said, I never bothered to ask him. What do you expect me to do? Pull power to save the engine? I thought it was the greatest approach to danger. You know, there's certain things that I can worry about, and there's other things I can't waste my time with. And so that whole thing with the danger definitely is part of the camaraderie because you're with a limited number of people, all of whom understand that there's some danger in the job. And then the rest of it is just you get accustomed to that camaraderie being reinforced either accidentally. Somebody calls you on the radio and they say, hey, that plan didn't work. We're doing such and such. And you go, bingo. You're on the other side of the fire. And so you're reinforcing that guy. You're not making something up. You're not, it's not fake. But all of those kinds of things. And then rookie initiations and those things that augment camaraderie, I think, are very important. You're on standby and you come up with some silly little game to play because it improves the time that you're there on standby. Over a long period of time, especially the people who jump for a long period, 20, 30 years, I think that camaraderie becomes probably the main part of the job.
That's good, Rod. Can you talk a little bit about the big flip or like singing or the wood gathering, the different ways that it's played out, especially in Alaska?
Yeah, in McCall, long before I got there, they had a tradition called heads outs, which is still jumper wide now, but McCall started it. And it was just you get in a circle and you're going to do some goofy stuff like do push ups over sheep shed or something or whatever. And everybody flips the same coin, and all the ones who got head are out. The ones who got a tail are still in, and the last tail has to do whatever. It was all kinds of silly stuff. Um, where you're on project work out at the airport, and you tie a small boulder to your glass tape a boulder to your white boot, and you have to work all day with that. Or somebody has to stay in the airplane all day, including using the bathroom. So somebody has to hollow out a container for them to do their do their business in. But one day I got thinking we were out at Lick Creek Summit on project work, just laying in the road eating lunch, and I thought, wait a minute, why does it always have to be something bad? I mean, it's the same thing. You're still flipping a coin around in a circle. Could be something good, right? Same thing. And so we got everybody who was interested. I think, well, I know how many because it was $440. So it was 22 guys, all put in $20 a piece, and we flipped a coin on the pool table in the rec room. And Tom, man, oh man, my memory. Tom, I'll have to think of his name. He won the first one, and the McCall guys still use the same quarter. All the way, that was in 1970. And so we did it every year until I left, and they kept doing it every single year. And I left in 75, and in 77, I talked all those guys in Alaska into doing it. And so, yeah, that's part of it. Doing things like that and making some huge event out of it. You know how much that flip was this year in Alaska? Pardon me. They switched it up to $100, and then about 20 years ago, no, 30 years ago, somebody came up with the idea, not me, came up with the idea of buybacks. If you're in the first round and you flipped ahead, what difference does it make if you get back in? It's just like another guy, right? You're just at the end of the line. And so, pardon me, the first round now takes forever. And the pot from, guys are buying their buddies back in. He flipped twice and he's out $200 and he says, I'm done. And his buddy buys him back in. $23,000 was last year's pot.
Wow.
Woo. Anyway, and then another thing about that is involved with camaraderie is rookie initiations. When I got up to AK, the rookie initiation was kind of get around in a circle and force somebody to drink a whole bunch of whiskey and so I got that changed in '84. We had no rookies, and so it was a good opportunity to make a different one. And in '85, we completely changed it. Um, they still think they're going to get in some kind of difficulty, but it never happens. And it's in two parts. The second half of it is downtown, and it's a celebration instead of a punishment or hazing. We turned it into a celebration, and the questions. There was a list of questions you ask them, and the questions are still the same all the way back from that first one at 8. Well, we changed it a couple times, but most of the questions ended up the same all the way back. So what's that? 40 years, and they still got the little packet of them. They keep in a special storage spot, and there was something else you asked. What?
Rod, well, just to tie into that real quick, I remember when I became a smoke jumper, that still sets with me, and I forgot until you said it, but it was a welcoming. And I thought that was pretty incredible because I expected something else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, where was this? Where'd you
this was
rookied
in
in what?
yeah, I was a West Yellowstone jumper, but I
Yeah.
rookied in Missoula. And
Right.
so it was 95. I was part of the class of 95, and it was a big party that we had, but it was a welcome fest, and we
Right.
all understood it, and it was pretty touching. We got our little wings, and we
Right.
became part of the community, which was pretty unique at the time.
I do think that the camaraderie is very, very important. The camaraderie between the people, and you see it if you go to a reunion. Guys, they jumped 2, 3 years, and it was the best time of their whole life, and they love going to that, maybe visiting a base and talking to young guys and seeing how most of it is still pretty much the same. The equipment is different, but that attitude and the fact that you're out in the middle of nowhere with four guys and you just jumped into some gorgeous scenery and you're thinking, well, there's not very many people maybe who ever even been here in this spot, but it's pretty unusual too. And I think that I think it's a very big part of it. And then the gorgeous scenery and the flights and that kind of thing. Um, Seeing full circle rainbows. Very few people have ever seen a full circle rainbow from below the ship. I've only seen it twice up in AK. Things like that. I saw a full circle, a full double on an island. We had a fire on an island in the Yukon, and a full arc for 35 minutes and a full double for 10 minutes. And of course, we're on the Yukon, so it's reflected in the water. And things like that there's not very many people get to see that kind of stuff. And so that's part of it too. Part of the love of jumping, I mean.
Something I saw, Rod, is that we would jump in a lot and camp and tell stories.
Yeah.
And our group actually saw ourselves as paracampers,
Yeah, of
and that the
course.
fire was just something extra we were doing because we had done it for so long, and we were all experts in it. But it was more about the getting together and telling the stories. Can you tell us a little bit about storytelling in jumpers?
Pardon me. Well, yeah, it's a very big part of it. I ended up having just one sentence reminders of about 100 stories over my career. Not just my stories. I mean, some other guys telling me stories or whatever. Most of them are mine, but and then because a one sentence reminder would remind me, and I could remember the story, and so I wrote them all down just to archive them in a book. And so, yes, I think it's a very important part of the job. in the evening, you're sitting around the campfire, and somebody comes up with something new that you haven't heard before. So it just happened on another fire, or some guy from another base, or you got boosters in, and so they've got stories that you didn't know about, and you've got stories that they don't know about, and yeah, it's a big part of it. We still get together twice a year. The AK guys have been getting together. We have a campground somewhere, and the last one was at Idaho City. So the guys that were around Boise, about 20 of them. The one before that was down at Folsom, California, because we had buddies down there, one of whom retired, Todd White, and he was refusing to have a retirement party, so we tricked him and just had it anyway, and then invited him to show up. But at all of those, yes, some stories you've heard before, and every so often you get some new ones, and it's definitely a big part of the whole thing. I remember what it was that you mentioned that I was trying to remember. The gatherings at my house for 20 years. The point of that was that storytelling tradition. Get guys together, enjoy yourself. My wife always used to say, "Why do you make them work when they come here?" They like to work. They love working. So we'd get the firewood in, and then in the evening we'd all gather, and she'd cook for 30 guys, and we'd tell stories. We had two guys pass away. Um, Big Mac, Gary McMurtry, and Black. What's Black's real name? Eric Schoenfeld. They had both passed away the previous year. And we sat there, I'll bet, for 2 straight hours telling Mac and Black stories. Funny stuff. The Black had an IQ of 160 at least. Had his real gravelly voice. He looked like a street bum, hobo, or whatever, but was just friggin' brilliant. And there was all kinds of stories about him. Max the same way, one of the most stubborn people I ever met. At that gathering, I hollered across the room. I said, "Hey, Don Bell, his good buddy. What percentage of the time when Mac worked for McManus for 7 years, how often did he actually do the job the way McManus told him to do it?" Bell said, "What are you talking about? Not one time. Never did he ever do the job the way McManus told him to. He would just do it the way he wanted to." So, just this individual uh, remembrances of people. My neighbors, the only time in the whole 20 years that I invited two of the neighbors over, they were sitting there. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. But again, that's part of why we gather up, to hear those stories, and then hear the new ones that young jumpers have. I just told the guys, there's a relatively new one from just a few years ago. Two AK guys were giving a morning briefing to two native crews. And he started giving the morning briefing, and immediately the crew boss raised his hand. He goes, and the jumper said, "I'm actually going to make this really short. So, just hang on." And he started to continue, and the native guy didn't say anything, just raised his hand again. And he goes, "I'm almost done." And he finished up. He says, "Yeah, you had something?" And the native kid goes, "Jumpers, your camp's on fire." Fine. they burned up 4 sets of gear. all in a pile. The whole thing went up, and the jumper in charge just had to go into the boss's office and just spill his guts and say, "Sorry, we screwed up and we burned 4 sets of gear." But anyway, the guys, they haven't been jumping for 30 years, and they love hearing that kind of stuff. Things that they could picture happening 30, 40, 50 years ago, and sure as hell, it happened to somebody just a couple years ago, and you know how they felt. Oh no, 4 sets of gear, and so that's part of it. You're included in that group because you were part of the group, and so when an old jumper shows up at a jump base, they treat you pretty well. They're very gracious and polite, and I've been going around to all the bases and giving them a little talk about parascension, and that started the ram airs, and they've been extremely gracious every time. Just a little 15-minute thing, but they're really nice, and that is why, because of that camaraderie, that storytelling, the things that were traditional 50, 60, 70 years ago, it's the same. You sit around a campfire in the evening and tell silly stories and make fun of your buddies and laugh at each other, and it's exactly the same now as it was then, because campfires are the campfires. It hasn't changed. You're sitting on a cubitator, same way you did 50, 60 years ago, and you tell a guy that jumped in the 50s what you were doing, and he gets it. He knows exactly what it was like. So, yeah, that it's very important, I think.
Rod, can you talk a little bit about some of the different subjects? Like I know we were talking yesterday about Murray, and we were talking about some of the bears or mooses or louse with the CIA, some of the different stories that we end up talking about. Can you kind of give the listeners just a little flavor of where we go in our stories?
Well, it's either some crazy thing about wildlife. A favorite, of course, is bad things that happen to your buddies. You know, I mean, the funniest stuff is things that happen to your buddies because you're imagining it happening to you, right? Um, Now, some of them are just extremely dangerous. Some of them aren't funny. I nearly got killed by a Rolagon, a free fell Rolagon in AK. But and so there's those kinds where something extremely tense and um, time sensitive. I've got to, if I don't get to there in the next 2 seconds, I'm dead. This kind of stuff. Um, Difficult jumps. Um, Crashing through ponderosa, uh, dead ponderosa trees and having limbs flying all over. And then I land at the bottom of one, and I think it's done. And a 10-foot, that thing was probably 10 inches in diameter and 10 feet long, hit me right on top of the head. Didn't hurt at all. Um, those kinds of things. That's one topic. Another topic is the funny stuff that happens to people. Um, you're, I remember watching. I didn't actually see it. I was there 1 minute later. A guy ran the forklift the very first year of a brand new $7 million building in Alaska, Jump Shack, and Mikey Arian ran the forklift at full speed with the fork bars right into the bay door. It looked like a cartoon, Bugs Bunny cartoon with the shape of the heister. And within within 3 minutes, every single jumper at the base was there laughing and going wild. And I looked over at Mikey, and he's not one of these guys who likes to make mistakes, you know. Some guys, whatever. And I went over and put my arm around him. I said, Mikey, just put up with it for 3 days, and it'll be over. Just gut it out for 3 days. And I turned around and walked away from him, and I walked past the picture board. And on this is 10 minutes total from impact to me walking past the picture board. Somebody's already gone to the newspaper and cut out a headline from the guy who got drunk and ran the Exxon Valdez into the rocks. Hazelwood got out Hazelwood and put it under Mike's picture. Took me about 15 years to figure out who did that, but that stuff is extremely typical. And then the wildlife, scenery, gorgeous scenery, and every single base has got that. It's just different. And then, you know, typical stuff that everybody goes through with your girlfriends and that kind of thing. Other topics don't come immediately to mind. It's fairly predictable, except for the regular guy off the street is not going to know about those dangerous things that happen. I remember being on a fire. I think there was more than one load of us, like a load and a half, and we're just chit-chatting around the campfire, one radio hanging from a tree, and all of a sudden a transmission comes over that the C-119 bellied into the Kayakuk drainage. It turned out he actually landed it. And I'll tell you what, that 3 or 4 conversations and laughing and shouting and whatever went dead silent in 1 second. What? And 4 of those guys had to jump out the back at really low altitude, like 300 feet. All of them made it. And then the co-pilot came back, cut the only remaining Rolagon loose, sent it out the back, which gave the pilot a little bit of lift. He went out, and then the pilot skipped it off of the water and slid it up on the gravel. And the only successful belly landing of a 119 ever that I think that's accurate, because the belly caves in. It's like a box shape, and you try and belly land it, and the bottom caves in and crushes the pilot. So things like that are, you know, you've got 12 guys sitting around a campfire, and every single guy knows, wait a minute, that transmission, that's not a normal transmission. That's 5 words that mean something extremely serious happened. And all 12 guys know it. That's part of the camaraderie too, and the storytelling. That you are part of that group that understands that situation. Yeah.
Rod, well, can you tell us a little bit about writing the book? How long did it take you? And how did you pick the stories that you picked to put in the book? And for the people that are interested, how could they buy a copy? How could they find it?
It's on Amazon. It's called Just a Few Jumper Stories. And that's an accurate title, because all I wanted to do was archive a bunch of campfire stories. I wasn't really, I tried to tell them in as interesting a way as possible, but I wasn't trying to do anything but archive the stories for future generations. It took me, I picked out 70 out of the 100. I had those 100 one-liners, one-line reminders, and I picked out 70 of them, and each one is between 2 pages, and I think the longest one was like 6 pages, something like that. Um, and it took me about, I'm not really sure, maybe 1 year working on it. I mean, I was still building on our house and raising a kid, and so it wasn't like I was able to do it 6, 8 hours a day. But I probably put in an hour or two a day for a year, something like that, maybe. Um, I'm having trouble actually remembering it. It couldn't have been 2 years, and I doubt very much if I finished it in 6 months. So somewhere in there, it was kind
Rod,
of enjoyable doing it.
why did you feel it was important to do it?
I just think that uh, those things that are, again, we're kind of back to camaraderie and storytelling. Storytelling has always been a very important part of humanity. um, it started a million years ago around their campfire or living in a cave or whatever. And you can't help but think that certain things are funny or certain things are dangerous, or every single person in the cave knows that a mastodon or a saber-toothed tiger, it's an important topic. If something happens relative to that, every person there, even the people who don't hunt, they're going to get it. They're going to understand. And so you have this premise that your audience understands what you're about to say. But what you're about to say is a new version of that. There's a ton of dangerous things that have happened in smoke jumping. And so everybody around the campfire knows what the deal is, what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. And so you start to tell a story, and similar events have happened before, so people know what you're talking about. And so the topic, the actual story, is a recreation of something that has happened hundreds of times in the past, but this one's a little bit unique for the following reasons. And you'll hear people say, you know how such and such happens? Well, it was different this time. It was like this because they know what that baseline is, and that is part of why the story works. Uh, you have a common understanding between people that makes the story work. And then the rest of it is just something that's funny happened or something particularly dangerous. Have you ever heard the story of we called him Dun Dun, uh, Gary Dunning?
He was a
Uh,
West Yellowstone guy. Yeah,
yeah, and then he came up
yeah,
north and got that tree through his leg. You ever heard that?
I have, but can you share a little bit about it for the listeners? Yeah.
Gary Dunning came out of West Yellowstone after jumping for a long time, and jumped with us in Alaska for about 10 years, whatever, 10, 12 years. Great guy. Uh, and he landed in the top of a spike topped black spruce, not tall, 25 feet or whatever, 20 feet, but the top had been busted out, and he hit it just wrong and the top of the tree went through his thigh. And we all knew that it had happened. And Good Morning America came up maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, and hung around, and they were filming, and somebody, I wasn't there at the time. They would ask you if you wanted to sit at the picnic table and do an interview, and I wasn't super interested, but some guys were, and somebody must have told them, go ask that guy over there about his injury, because a month later, Roger Boris, our boss, morning roll call, he says, "Hey, that Good Morning America thing is on tomorrow morning. If you feel like it." So yeah, I was in an apartment, and I got making my coffee, and I turned on the TV, and sure enough, I didn't know that they had interviewed Dun Dun. Sure enough, after some preliminary stuff, there's Dun Dun on the camera. You don't see the interviewer, and you hear this voice. What's your name, and how long you been jumping? My name's Gary Dunning, and I've been jumping for 28 years. And have you ever been injured? Well, yeah, one serious one. And Dun Dun's kind of shy, one of these guys that half the time he's looking at his toes. And the guy says, "So what was that?" And he said, "Well, I landed in the top of a spike-topped spruce tree, and it went through my thigh here." And there's a pause, and the guy goes, "So when you got to the ground, you had a big chunk of the tree through your leg?" He said, "Well, actually," he wasn't smiling. He said, "Actually, the tree didn't break." And there's another pause, and the guy goes, "So you were hanging from the top of the tree, skewered through your thigh?" He said, "Yes, sir, that's correct." "So how did you get down?" He said, "Well, unfortunately, none of the other guys landed right there where I was. And so the only way to get down was to swing back and forth until I broke the top of the tree out." And, this isn't extreme sports. This is Good Morning America. People are drinking coffee. And that Joe Garagiola guy that used to be on they switched immediately from that over to the group. And he's going, "Oh, no." Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So that kind of thing, if you just had a little bit of a nasty landing, I mean, nobody's going to care around the campfire. But stuff like that's pretty good.
That's
Anyway.
classic story. That's
Yeah.
I heard it around campfires, and I met him too. I liked him. He was a good guy.
Yeah. You met him after he left, or were you
It was
still at
after he
work?
left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him.
No, very
Yeah,
nice guy. He's a
yeah,
great guy.
that's what I thought. He's real
Ended
quiet.
up getting killed in an ice climbing accident. Um, I think it was
Yep,
in lower 48. It was out of Missoula somewhere.
yep. I remember when that happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was a group of 5 guys at West that were all Special Forces medics, if I remember right.
Oh,
And
no
they were
kidding.
reserves. Yeah,
Oh,
Davis was
I
one.
didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, Bill Warehand. There was a couple of them,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm pretty sure Gary was one of them.
Huh.
He was a legend when I was
Yeah,
jumping.
he was great. I like that guy.
Yeah. Well, Rod, thank you for your time. We really all appreciate getting a chance to know you a little bit and learning a little bit more about camaraderie and why it's important, and also more about smoke jumping, because we're in a closed community, and it's not always there's an opportunity for people from the outside to get to learn about us and kind of see how we interact. And I really appreciate it. I'm glad we're getting an
Hey,
opportunity to meet some of you guys.
my pleasure, Mike. I love talking about jumping. It's a great topic and a bunch of really great guys, and so yeah, no problem.
Great. And we'll have you back again for some other
Okay,
subjects. Thank you,
okay,
Rod.
man.
We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.